exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Are you going to go to the Mission Factory?
Yeah, we sure are.
Okay, we are ready to get started. Everybody has so much energy. This is awesome. Is it like Thanksgiving is coming up and you're excited? That's good. That's good. I like you. So today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the project assignment in detail. So how many of you got the email from me? About the project assignment? Did you get it through Canvas or directly, or did you get it like 5 different ways?
5 different ways.
So over the weekend, the server was acting up, and so like it was bouncing like emails back and forth. And so I was just thinking, okay, this is not getting through, so I need to do like an APB on this. I've also printed out copies of it. I don't know if you need it. I'll just circulate those. But if you do need it, you get it. So like there will be no excuse as to why you did or didn't have it. Well, I didn't get the email server is working. The other thing I want to point out too is, so some of you were not in class last week, and I handed out these 2 handouts. So this is Bargaining the Shadows of Divorce. So this is the paper on unilateral divorce that you can use to reference, even if you're writing the divorce one. And then this is the 3 strikes paper. You should have also gotten these. How many of you got this in your email? Okay, good. Does anybody need either a copy of either of these guys here? Okay, cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, if you already have it, like don't take an extra copy. Just I'm going to circulate that. And then this is the 3 strike stuff. So this is a little bit. Who wanted the 3 strike stuff? Who didn't have it? Just raise your hands. Okay. Who else needs 3 strikes? Okay. You need one as well? That one you have to save the early. Anybody else do the 3 strikes one? Okay. Okay.
Can we have another copy so you can
Say that again?
Oh, never mind.
We're good.
No, it's just fine. Okay. I really want to make sure that you have these things. Okay. So here's where we're going. So far in the course, well, we started off this course by building up this modeling toolkit, right? So we looked at utility maximization, profit maximization. We started to understand what consumers are firms, right? Did that kind of a recap. Then what we did is we started talking about individual decisions, like when is it optimal for an individual to get education versus not education. And in the second half of the course, we've been focusing a lot on the production of education. We've been looking more on you can think of this as like the firm side, right? So we think about the schools as firms, and we think about the teachers as inputs into those firms. We think about the resources as inputs into those firms. And we're asking, what's the most efficient way to produce education? In addition to that, we recently started thinking about the labor unions and saying, how does the presence of labor unions affect the ability of firms, in this case colleges, to produce education? Okay. And what we're going to do in this project is really kind of like bring a lot of these tools together. So the modeling tools we're going to bring together when you write down a model for the economic question at hand. But then we're going to bring together the tools of like data analysis by you actually going out there, getting your hands on a data set, starting to understand it, put it together, and to run some regressions on that. So what I want to do in this lecture is like really go through what the assignment is, what the expectations are in a very detailed way. And so for a number of you who will be going on to roles in consulting or to do master's degrees or PhDs or whatever job you're doing, you're going to be handed a project. And you're going to have to be able to define the project and say, well, what is the question? You're going to have to be able to then come up with an implementation plan in terms of what do I need to do to execute this project in a step-by-step way. And then you have to actually go forth and like do the work, understand what you've done, and then write it up in a convincing way to be able to present it. So this is an extremely practical skill. The other thing that I really want to highlight with this assignment is I want you to be able to teamwork and to do stuff. So you have like about 2 weeks to do this, right? But you're working in teams of like 2 or 3 people, and so you have to think about how do we divide up the labor so that we can make sure that all of the bases are covered, but at the same time too, come back together and like put everything together and make sure that we understand the various components of this. Because if everybody focuses on doing everything, then you move a lot more slowly. But if everybody like completely does a division of labor and you don't check what your partner's done, you don't benefit from their ability to think and to really edit the work that you've done. And so I really want you to come away from this project to like the ability to be able to work collaboratively with other people to create a product that's really good. And as you make choices about the project too, there may be some disagreements, like how you handle that is going to be really important. I can think about one experience in graduate school where I worked on a team, and I thought that something should have been done, and I was not as assertive in terms of making sure that thing was done, right? And so in hindsight, I'm like, I really should have been a little bit more assertive. And so this is the part where everybody stays in their lane, and you come together and make sure that you're double checking each other's work as well. So let's do this. We're going to go through this really step by step. And what I'm going to do in addition to that is I'm going to stop at various places. So in some of the places where we talk about the data analysis, I'll kind of like highlight some key things about that in terms of like how to put together the paper too. I'll like open up the Shirley Tech and show an example of the paper that I've written so that you get a sense of like what the format can look like. Okay, so can I get a volunteer just to read what the assignment is? So this part that says assignment. So everybody pull out your sheet. Give me your name again, please.
Michael.
Michael. What's your last name, Michael?
Magnon.
Michael. Okay, so that's Michael Robinson on the side. Okay. Mike. Big loud voice.
The goals of this project is to study the link between an individual's beliefs on how long he or she will be in the labor market and his or her likelihood to invest in education. There are two possible projects that you can pursue, and you must choose one. Either you can study the effect of unilateral divorce laws on female investment in human capital. Alternatively, you can study the effect of three strikes laws on the educational investment of black men. The key idea here is that the unilateral divorce laws change the probability that a woman would re-enter the labor market, while the three strikes laws change the probability that any citizen would be in the labor market. Given that black men have the highest felon rate, by almost a factor of 6 relative to white men, it is expected that three strikes laws might have an even more pronounced effect on the probability that black men are in the labor market when compared to women and non-black men. The research question is, do we see individuals responding to these laws in the way that we would predict from economic theory? This project is to be done within your group. Each group should make one submission of a LaTeX document summarizing the research approach and results.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much. So, any questions on the assignment? Any questions on that? On like the overall objectives? Okay. All right, good. So, what I've done is, and I probably spent like 4 hours like really putting this together, because what I learned from the theoretical exercise is that it's really valuable for me to break down the exercise in like digestible bits, and also use this as a way to figure out like what's the optimal division of labor within your groups as well. Okay, so the first step is to read the 2 articles and to decide. How many of you guys have read the articles and have decided for your group which project you're going to do? Okay, have you emailed me? Okay, I think I've gotten maybe like 4 emails.
My email share.
Yeah, and I got one from them.
You got, okay, you got from them, okay. What to do is like make sure that you've emailed either Shannon or me, and in fact, like let's do, how many emails have you got, Jen?
I think I was CC'd on 2, and then I got just 1 that wasn't sent to you.
Okay, well what to do, are there any groups that are not decided yet, that have not decided, any groups that haven't decided? Okay, so all of the groups have decided. Your group is not decided? Okay. Do you think you'll have a decision, when do you think you'll have a decision by? Okay, good. Okay, so that's the first step. What to do is, if you haven't emailed me or Shannon, please email the both of us and include that on the CC. And then Shannon, if you can just put together like a list of the different groups and like which projects they're working on, I appreciate that. Okay. All right. Who's doing unilateral divorce? Just to show advantage and see which groups are. Anyone doing the three strikes? Okay, guys, you got 3 strikes? Okay, great. And what you can do as well too is like I have no problem with you guys talking to other groups about how you're approaching the project. So the whole point is for you to learn, and everyone in this class is like a resource to each other. The grading distribution is like a fixed grading distribution, so you're not disadvantaging yourself by talking to other people at all. Okay? So I totally encourage that, especially you guys who are doing it with 3 strikes. Like if you want to talk, feel free to talk. Each group is responsible for its own submission. This is not an obligation to talk about. Just letting you know. Okay. Now And one other note on the reading too, like I mentioned this in the emails, but how I encourage you to read papers is first read the title, read the abstract, read the introduction, then read the conclusion, so that you get the big picture, and then circle back and then read the middle portion of the paper. Because sometimes what can happen is if you read straight through a paper, you can get caught up in the details and miss some of the big picture elements. Okay, so the second step is to write down an economic model, to really like go through and to think about like what are the relevant trade-offs that are going that the agents are going to be faced with. Now, this is really important. So before you solve any problem, you always want to stop and think, who are the actors? What are the decisions that they're making? What are the constraints that they're facing? And how are these considerations changing given the environment that we're looking at, right? And before you take up a pencil or paper to solve the model, before you run a regression, you should really build a very strong intuition for like what's going to happen. I feel very strongly about that. I'll tell you a story of one of my students. So this was the first time that I taught when I was a graduate student at Wharton. And brilliant guy, just A+ student in math, but he totally bombed in the German in my class. And he was so frustrated because he said, well, I know I can do the math, and why is it that I'm not doing well in the course? And let's call him Frank. And I said, Frank, don't just start the questions. Stop, read the questions, understand what's happening, and then build some intuition about what you think the answer should be. Because even without doing that, you can tell me like what your expectation is when a unilateral divorce law passes, right? And so you should have this kind of intuition going around in your mind. And then what you want to do is you want to write out the environment, which is going to be like the context of the model, and then solve the model, and then start getting into that. And then once you have a sense of what the model is, then you can go to the data. So let me get a volunteer to read through question 2. And the reason why I'm going through this in a very systematic way is because I want to make sure that you understand exactly what this exercise entails. And if you're able to do this exercise excellently, like you're in really good stead for doing research, for entering the labor market, for like somebody giving you a task and you just go about that task. Okay, can I get a volunteer to read question 2? Okay, so Tom, I'll let you read this, and then Henry, you can read question 3 for us. What I want you to do is, like, after each letter, just stop, and then we'll see if there are any questions. Please go ahead.
Solve a simple 2-period economic model to understand how the laws affect schooling choice. We assume that the individual is a juvenile in t equals 0 and an adult in t equals 1. Hence, the law only applies to the individual in t equals 1 when he/she is an adult.
Stop there. Any questions on that? Okay. So basically we're just, in reality, it's like an individual is going to live for like 60, 70, 80 years, right? But for our purposes, we just need to figure out like a 2-period model, because it's like in one case the law applies, in the other case the law doesn't apply. In one period, he or she's going to be able to apply for college, in the other period it won't work, right? And so with a model, you always want to think about how can I simplify reality so that I can actually solve it.
Further assume that t equals 1 is the law affects the probability that he or she is in the labor market as an adult versus staying at home or being incarcerated.
Okay. Any questions about that assumption? Does anybody think that that's a bad assumption? Is that a good assumption? Or like, what are your thoughts? And you're free to have like an opinion. You can disagree. Right? Because you might say, Professor Blair, this is a stupid model that you've written down. I can think of like a much more amazing model. And if you can, by all means, like write it down and solve it. Right? Any questions on this assumption or any comments on it?
If the individual attends college, he or she incurs a cost -c, t equals 0, and t equals 1. Works with probability p. Earning an expected wage of WO 1 plus gamma p, where gamma is the return to schooling.
Let me just stop there for a second. So does everybody follow what's happening in this second part, in this part C here? Yeah. Okay, so the injury works. If he goes to college, costs C in time period 0. So in the 2 periods, the first period, t equals 0, is the period in which the individual can invest in college. The second period is when the individual can work after going to college. But if the, okay, and the key thing there is if the individual goes to college, they don't just earn omega 0. They earn omega 0 times 1 plus gamma, which is the return to college. However, there's some likelihood that they may not be in the labor market, which is P. And that can be for whatever reason, right? It could just be that they decide, well, I really don't like working. Or this person ends up like marrying a spouse that's like super rich, or they win the lottery, or any number of things can happen.
If the individual opts to work in T equals 0, he or she earns WO in T equals 0 and in T equals 1, works with probability B, earning the expected wage of WO P.
And the same thing applies again too, right? So what we said is that the law is going to be impacting the individual in the second period because this is when the individual is involved. And so for the person that doesn't go to college, they're going to earn the same wage in time period T equals 0 and also in time period T equals 1. Because it's really the fact that you go to college that's going to augment the returns to that's going to augment your wages. It's the returns to education that's going to do that. But again, with probability P, you're not going to be with probability P, you'll be in the labor market in a future period. And so the expected value of your wage is going to be whatever the wage is times the probability that you're in the labor market. Is that quite clear? Okay.
Taking R to be the interest rate, solve for the value of gamma that makes the agent different between going to college and not going to college. You should get an expression for gamma star that is a function of WO, R, C, and P. What choice the agent makes if, what is the choice that the agent makes if gamma is less than gamma star or gamma is greater than gamma star?
And so this is familiar to you from the homework, right? And this is also familiar to you from the lecture. One of the differences here is you're completely solving this symbolically. And by symbolically, what I mean is all of the Greek letters are there. That should not make you afraid, right? Because it's like it's just algebra. Now, the key idea here is that this threshold is going to determine whether you work or not work. And this threshold is going to be a function of all of these parameters in addition to P. And P is going to be affected by the law, right? And so in a sense, like we're encoding the ability of the law to affect the working decision through P, which is the probability. And so like going back to like this idea of like modeling choices, it's important if you want to study the effect of the law, you have to think about how does the law enter the model. And in our case, the law is going to enter the model through P.
Discuss how the change in the legal regime that you study affects P. The probability that an agent is
in the labor market. That's
okay, yeah, that an agent is in the labor market. Further discuss how this change in P that is caused by the new law affects gamma star. The agent's indifference threshold. Given the change in gamma star, do you expect more people to go to college as a result of the law or less? Explain your answer.
So let's stop here for like a second. This there is So what I want us to think about is the following. So decision to attend college depends on threshold gamma star. And so this is going to help you out a little bit. So let's say on the y-axis we have gamma. on the x-axis or on the y-axis we have this is f of gamma, which is basically telling us how many people in the population have a value of gamma for the return to college. And so we can think about the return to college is going to depend on gender, it's going to depend on where you go to school, it's going to depend on all of these other factors, right? And so it might look something, it might look something that's like a normal distribution, so right? Now, let's say, for example, that gamma star is here. Right? So for people who have a value of gamma that's greater than gamma star, what are they going to do? So remember, gamma is the return to college, right? So at gamma star, you're going to be indifferent between going to college and not going to college. So if the return to college for a given person is higher than the threshold value, what's going to happen to that person? What decision are they going to make? They're going to go to college. And so all of these people here are going to go to college. And all of these people are not going to go to college. Now remember this gamma star here. Just stop there for a second. Is this clear so far? Okay. And so this is just like this is telling like how many people are at a given level of gamma. So this could even be like a set of squares or something like that, or we have discrete amounts of gamma. Right? This is like your probability distribution function. This gamma star is going to be a function of what? What is the gamma star going to be a function of? What's going to affect the threshold?
Wage you make if you go to college.
Yeah. So we can have omega naught. The wage if you don't go to college is going to affect omega naught, the interest rate, right? The probability of working in the second period. Because if you know for sure you're going to work in the second period, then your expectation is going to be that the wage in the second period is going to be even more valuable. But if you know that there's probability 0 that you're going to work in the second period, then it's like, well, it's just as if I'm not going to work in the second period. Why would I incur the cost of going to college? Let's see. Which one of these is the law going to change? The law's going to change P. So we have to. Now, how do you hypothesize that the law is going to change P? So this is an empirical question. Like we should actually look at the data and see how does the change in unilateral divorce laws affect the probability that it works, right? So that's an empirical question. But we could still have a hypothesis, which is an educated guess about this. So let's hear a couple of like hypotheses. Like, what do you think? Is P going to go up or is it going to go down after the passage of these unilateral divorce laws? It's going to go up, but why would it go up?
It's easier to get a divorce than there's going to be a big probability that they're going to be back in the labor market. So
Okay.
they keep running the wage their spouse.
So you can't depend on the way you stuff. Any other thoughts on whether P is going to go up or down, and also reasons why? I want to hear from a couple of people. Thank you for getting this started. So let's think your economist here. So what is a unilateral divorce law? So somebody define that and then tell me in advance. What is unilateral divorce law?
Divorce, basically.
No fault divorce.
Simple as basically agree to get divorced at that point instead of having to have cause justified in court of law.
There's something else about unilateral divorce laws. The unique part. What's the unique part telling us? Yeah, only one side is necessary to initiate the divorce. So you don't need the two sides to say, okay, we both want to have a divorce, right? Okay. So we know what unilateral divorce is. And so like let's have some other thoughts about like how is this law going to change people? Yes.
There may be a downward effect if it's easy to get a divorce and the spouse can get money through the divorce and then be less likely to work.
Hold on, say that again.
It's easier to get a divorce and then they can like get money from their spouse through the divorce and then maybe a settlement or something, they may be less likely to work because of that, the additional income through the divorce.
Hold on, I'm trying to understand this. So it's easier to get a divorce. You're more likely, you said, to get a settlement. Like if you do go to divorce, you're more likely to get a settlement from the divorce. And so the probability of getting divorced should go down, you're saying?
No, and so that would increase their income if they're getting a settlement from the divorce, and the increase in income from that additional source would decrease their likelihood of work. I don't think I'll do that.
Hold on. I'm missing a piece there. Am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
I think the easier it is to get a divorce, the more likely there are to be alimony payments after the fact, which would lower the probabilities of financial alimony.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. So you should expect that, okay, I see. Okay, I got you. So, easy to get divorced, which is gonna imply that you have alimony payments. So this is like an alternative source of income. So lower incentive to return to the labor market. Decreases. Thank you very much. Other thoughts? Other thoughts?
It's kind of shaky, but if divorce is easier to get, if it's easier to get divorced, people would be maybe more likely to get married because they don't feel it's as much of a commitment, which could make people less likely to work because they'd be more likely to drop out of labor force when they get married.
Okay.
And then that would change it if they got divorced, but I guess it's shaky. But
No, it's not shaky. And don't, whenever you give an opinion, like don't disqualify your opinion. Don't say, well, like this is like not a good idea, but like let me just say, no, don't ever say that. Like if you have something to say, you know that Sarah Bareilles song, say what you wanna say, and let the words go. Honestly, I want you to be so just no, I mean, but this is really important. Like if you like what you have to say matters and it's valuable, and you have an opinion, and like you should never undercut your own opinion. You should always like articulate it, and then the onus should be on somebody else to like fight back. That's exactly right. So what we've talked about so far is in a sense, like we've looked, so these two things have been on the intensive margin. So for people who are in marriages, right, if it's easy to get a divorce, then you can't depend on your spouse, right? If it's easier to get a divorce, then you're more likely to get these alimony payments, right? And so this is kind of already like conditional on being in a marriage, right? But your point is really about, this is extensive margin, about who actually gets married in the first place to actually then have access to the divorce. And that's like the extensive margin, right? Like this is like the sorting. So basically what you're saying is these unilateral divorce laws are gonna change exactly who is actually getting married. This is like the composition of who's getting married, right? Which is awesome. It would be like, let me use an analogy. It would be like if Clemson won the national title, right? So when, oh, that's good. Okay, when Clemson wins the national title, they're gonna, like, and we say, like, what's the effect of Clemson winning the national title this year on Clemson football attendance next year? There'll be two effects. One effect would be that, so people who are already at Clemson, they will say, oh my God, like, we're national champions, I need to go. And so there'll be some people who were at Clemson, but who didn't go before. And then secondly, there are gonna be some people who say, you know what, I actually want to go to Clemson in order to go to these football games because Clemson is a national champion. And so this is like the extensive margin, right? These people who are not already there, but then they're gonna now enter this market, so the whole composition changes too. And like this is why it's important to think like economists, right? Because like when I first posed this question, maybe like some of you might have, who thought that there was just one answer? That was just up or down when I first posed this question. Oh, right. So like one person. But it's easy to think that there's just one answer, but like oftentimes there's so many things that change. Like when you change one thing, you have to think through this. So Mike, let's walk us through again your walk us through your point again.
So if divorces are easier to get, people would be more likely to get married because, like, get married earlier because they're less of a long-term commitment maybe, or less of a lock-in, which would increase the amount of people who might leave the labor force because they're married and they can depend on a spouse.
Okay, so if divorce is easier, you can say people are more likely to get married. So this is like, the economics of this is like greater selection into marriage. You know, because it's less of a commitment, right? So it's lower commitment. So we can think about this as like the lower commitment is like reducing the cost of getting married, right? This would be just like if you said the only thing you need to do is go to Elvis to get married, as opposed to like before, like you need to go to a church and like a pastor and so on and so forth, right? And so we're putting this in economic terms, so you're reducing the cost of marriage. And then finish the thought.
Which would lower the probability
Uh-huh.
because more people would be likely to drop out because of
Okay.
maternity leave or depending on a spouse.
I see. And so what you're saying is more people are likely to get married, and so because they're more likely to get married, they're more likely to have the obligations of marriage that would result in them leaving the labor market.
Yes.
So they're, so this is higher likelihood. And I think you guys can you see below? No, you can't see below this. So I'm going to go to this piece here. Yeah, this is really good. I'm very proud of you guys. Like just your ability to like think through this. Like you're thinking like economists, coming up with different predictions and also different mechanisms too. Okay. So this is point 3. Okay, so a higher likelihood of, let's see, of leaving the labor market. Because of kids, attending the household. Etc. Right? Okay. That's really good. Who can turn this argument on its head? Who? 3. Alex.
what I was going to say is the exact opposite of number 3, which was if divorce is easier, less people are going to want to get married because of, on the note of a certain Kanye West song, people are going to be more easily screwed over by a person that wants to get out.
You mentioned a song that you have to sing it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. How does the Kanye West song go?
Take my money!
That's awesome.
That's the Jamie Foxx part of it, but you get the picture.
You have to send me a link to this. We can compile a soundtrack for this class with the best stuff. No, I mean like I don't intend to like have these moments with this. I'm thinking like this class. All right.
That's gonna go viral now.
So walk me through that, Alex. So divorce easier.
Because divorce is easier, people are less likely to get married out of fear of alimony payments and risk aversion to separation, basically.
I see. So they're less likely to get married because of like the pain of like divorce.
Mm-hmm. Therefore,
It's kind of like, it's more real, right?
yeah, more real,
More probable.
more probable too. And then thus your labor force is going to go up because there's less people depending on their spouse for income.
So labor force participation up. That's less dependence on spouse. Okay, all right. Any other thoughts about what could be happening?
I mean, could you use the ones that cover the areas?
Sure.
Their outcomes were just an 8 to 16% decline in female suicide, and 10% decline in females murdered by their partners. And with a higher number of females in the population, increase the likelihood that they're going to be in the labor force.
I see. So what you're saying is that these mental health outcomes. So like if divorce is easier, you're more likely just to like survive marriage, like and just like be around.
Yeah.
So this is the I will survive hypothesis. I think you guys should have heard that. Who sings that song?
Gloria Gaynor.
So this is the I. So divorce is easier. So you're more likely to survive an abusive spouse. So you're more likely to survive an abusive spouse. And what's that going to do to your divorce participation?
Increase in survival.
Okay. Increase the probability that you're in the labor market. This is good. So this is like, these are 5 sets of predictions. So what's the key message here? So the key message here is whenever you have a policy, it's like before you look at any data, it's like so many possible things can happen, right? Like the song says, anything can happen. I feel like I'm gonna get papers with like YouTube links to songs. That'd be really funny. But anything can happen, right? You can have like it's easier to get a divorce, so the probability can go up, it can go down. And not just anything can happen, but there are any number of reasons why anything can happen. And so you always want to sit and think about all of these different possibilities. Like we like to call this in economics the law of unintended consequences, right? Okay. Now, here's something to think about. Each of these are different mechanisms, right? And they're operating in different ways. So like, which of these are operating on the intensive margin? Which of these mechanisms are operating on the intensive margin? Say that again. So you say that 1, 2, and 5 are intensive margin, guys. So these are IM. Who agrees? Who agrees with this? Okay. Why do you agree? Why the intensive margin?
It's like situations where you're already in marriage.
Exactly. And which ones are the extensive margin, guys? Which ones are the extensive margin, guys? It's not a trick question.
The rest of them.
And these are extensive margin, guys. Okay. Now, so like, and each of these we're going to call mechanisms, right? So there are a couple of thoughts. Let's go. It was actually kind of fun. You guys are like becoming like really economists. Like this is the purpose of like learning stuff, right? So that you can think. It's not just to do homeworks. All right. So. All right. Okay. So here's some thoughts. Can you guys see over here, or is this like too far away? Is that like too far away? Or you can see? Okay, so here's some thoughts. Okay. So the first thought is anything can happen. And for any reason. So you need to list the possibilities. Right? Kind of the sub-point to this is each possibility is a mechanism, right? And so in this case, in the extensive margin cases, the divorce laws are going to be affecting the probability of labor force participation by changing who actually is in the labor force. That's an extensive margin thing. So like that's one mechanism. It fundamentally changes who is in the labor. It's going to change who is in the labor force by changing who's getting married. It's going to be changing the probability, the overall probability of being in the labor force by changing who's getting married. That's the right. And we call these things mechanisms, right? So the mechanisms is like, how does it happen? So if I just told you that the probability of divorce goes up, the probability of labor force participation rather goes up, telling you why it goes up is a mechanism. And each of these mechanisms have testable predictions, right? So take, for example, it's easier to get a divorce, so people can't depend on the wage of the spouse. Who's most likely to be affected by this? Well, what kind of women? So that's a good point. So women, right? So already like what you're saying is that like men are less likely to be dependent on this. And why men are less likely to be affected by this?
Just probably like if I'm not, maybe like more women would stay home than men.
Right. So it's like this element of like a social norm. So first you say like, okay, so let's look at the mechanism. So we're talking about mechanisms. So for this one here, you're saying, okay, women are going to be affected more likely by this. Let me use a color. I'm going to call this mechanism. So you expect women. And then which type of women specifically? And what's another characteristic? But also depend on the wealth of the woman too, right? Like if she's independently wealthy and she's a trust fund, and so poor women too, right? Or low income. Okay. And you can do this for each of these, right? And so then what you do is you would say, well, okay, let's look at women with incomes below the median. Like what's happening to them versus women above the median. So if it's really that story, then what we should see is we should see an effect for women as opposed to men, and we should also see an effect for women who are most likely to be low income versus women who are high income, and more likely for women who are more likely to be stay-at-home moms. Like if there's some characteristic of women that predicts whether they're a stay-at-home mom, for example, like if was their mom a stay-at-home mom or something like that, right? And so you can separate out these mechanisms by looking at things like this. Let's look at this selection into marriage. Who's most likely to be? So what we're saying is, if divorce is easier, so it's more likely for people to get married, right? So who's likely to be affected by this? Like how do we test for that mechanism? Like which segment of the population is going to be most sensitive to the change in the law with this particular mechanism?
Like non-married people, single people.
Okay. And let's think about it, like what type of single people, like where the cost of getting married and getting divorced is going to be really important to them, right? Because the mechanism really has to do with like, okay, we lower the cost of getting married, and so therefore I'm more likely to get married. Who's going to be most responsive to this?
People who are most likely to get a divorce.
I mean, so let's think about like the characteristics of the people. So what we're
Same like
what
young.
you're talking about is something that's endogenous, right? So like people are more likely to get a divorce. Divorce is going to be some future choice. Let's think about like some kind of attribute of the person that's going to impact this.
Lower income.
Okay. Lower income. Or you can cut it. You can kind of cut that both ways too. Might be unclear. It could also be like higher income people because maybe like for them like their time is money and it's really like important for them like for this to be like really easy if this needs to happen, right? Because they have more at stake, they have more skin in the game. So it actually can cut both ways. All right. Okay. So you can kind of like go through this kind of an exercise to really think about who's going, like what are anything can happen in any type of ways, right? And so these are all the possibilities, and then each of these possibilities are going to suggest a mechanism, and then to go through those mechanisms. So under this point here, we're going to say anything can happen for any number of reasons, right? Each possibility is a mechanism. And each mechanism affects different subgroups. And so you have to think about what subgroup do I think is going to be impacted by this. And then you just restrict your analysis to that subgroup and say, okay, if we look overall, this is what we see. But then when we look within this particular subgroup, this is what we see, right? And for some of these extensive margin things where we're talking about changing the composition of who's getting married, we could even look at like what are the characteristics of people who are getting married and are they changing? Do we see that the people that are getting married tend to be more white or more black? Do they tend to be younger or older? Are people delaying marriage? And so you can even look at how are the average characteristics of the people getting married changing with respect to like the implementation of these things. Okay. Now, coming back to here, so we have this initial threshold, right? And the probability of participating in the labor force is going to be some value before the divorce law is passed. If the divorce law increases P, then what is it going to do to this threshold?
Decrease it
Why would it decrease it? Why would it decrease the threshold?
because it like so P increasing affects or increases how much the second period like T equals 1 is worth.
Yeah.
But because you're using W naught in both, but for the college example, it is multiplied by the return to college, it's increasing. And increasing P helps people who go to college more than people who don't.
Right, and so P is going to be your probability of being in the labor market in the second period, right? And so what's going to happen is the return in the second period, if you go to college, you make more than if you don't go to college, right? And so if I were indifferent between going to college versus not going to college for a level of P equals a half, if P goes from a half to 3/4, then the expected benefit of going to college has increased even further because I'm more likely to be in the labor market and to reap the rewards from that. And so I'm more likely to stay in the labor market. So the threshold actually goes down for me for the return to college. Like even at a lower return to college, I would actually choose to go to college because now I'm more likely to benefit from that return to college. Does that make sense? Okay. And so in that case, the threshold would drop down, right? And we would have like all of these new people entering the market, or all of these new people now going back to college. So this is kind of the behavioral response. So the law impacts P is going to impact this threshold, and because of this threshold, then we're going to get like an effect on who is coming into the market. We're going to get an effect on the decision of like an individual person, and then also the effect of the decision of somebody who's already in the market too. Because these people, in a sense, like these people here, they were already in the market, and so what could happen is these people here too they're not going to sort into the market, but they may actually, instead of like just getting a college degree, they may get like a master's degree. Whereas there are some people who are not even getting a college degree, and those people may be getting a college degree too. And so in the second section, we're going to talk about some of these responses. So Hannah, I think I asked you to read question part 3.
List the outcomes that you want to measure or think are important to measure. For example, extensive margin, the probability of going to college, probability of graduating, intensive margin, the number of degrees, earnings. List the control variables that you need in the regression. Write down how many years of data you need.
So, and the footnotes are actually very important. The footnotes have links to certain places where you can actually find data. And so the point of this is really to think about what are the outcomes that you want to measure, right? So you want to really think through like what are the behavioral responses that these laws are generating. So we talked about some of these mechanisms here, right? And then you want to think about what do you want to take into account. You read part B.
Write out your regression equation and state key parameters of interest.
So from the last class, we went through like a regression equation that was in the Huxley paper. We talked about what's the relationship on per pupil spending and like immunization. We talked about like what were some of the things that we wanted to control for, and then how we can use the same regression equation across different time periods to really get at what's the effect of schooling on, what's the effect of immunization on per pupil spending. And if you can read the part C.
Locate and download your data for the changes by state and by year and the outcomes and control variables in your regression model. You may need 2 data sources, 1 for each.
Okay, good. And the footnotes that refer you to that. Let's take like a 5-minute, let's say like a 3 to 5 minute break. And then when we come back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you like how I want the paper to be presented, give you some best practices with Shirley Tech, and then also to its data for doing the analysis. So let's just take a break.